Welcome back to another edition. And I am super excited. This is a historical moment in in this podcast, which there have been a lot of historical moments, but this is a big one because I have somebody on I've never had on before, and I've never had on anybody with the credentials that Joy has. So let me introduce Joy. She's a certified financial planner. She is a licensed therapist. She is certified in internal family systems, a certified internal family systems therapist. She has a master's in taxation from Villanova. She has a master's in counseling from Arcadia. What other credentials could you possibly have that would qualify you for doing this work? So, Joy, welcome to the podcast. It is a delight to have you on.
Thank you. It is a delight to be here.
I was telling Joy just as we started up that Joy has a very unique position that I've never had anybody else on in the podcast that is a CFP and certified in IFS therapy. And Joy, I mean, how many people in the world are a certified IFS therapist and a CFP?
I don't know. I've come across a handful of people in the United States who have the CFP and are licensed therapists. There are a few others. I'm estimating there's maybe only like 50 of us who are active on both sides of that and keep that active. And then within that, I don't know how many are certified in IFS. But yeah, I think it's not a super common. The middle of this Venn diagram is pretty small.
It is very small. So tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a CFP licensed therapist and then a certified IFS therapist.
Sure. So I'm going to give the slightly longer version of the story since we're on a podcast here and we have some time. So I was raised in a cult that used money to control people. So I saw up close as a child that money meant power. And so I wanted to figure out how could I get some power, because the cult was, very anti-women. And so women were not allowed to have money or power. So I was like, how do I get access to power? Apparently it's through money. So when I went to college, I needed to work my way through school full time. I worked for a financial planner, answering phones, filling out forms. And I saw up close, wow, this is a great career for me. And also it got me close to money, that I got to see how money worked and the way it moves through the world. And it was easy for me. It was a role that was, being a financial planner was easy for me. And I really was initially drawn to it because I think consciously I wanted to help people. And then there was also a level where it was a way for me to get access to money and power. So I became a certified financial planner because I was building a book. I eventually was managing a boutique practice. And then I decided it was the crash of 2008. I was like, wow, it is hard being an entrepreneur in this environment. I think I'd like to have more of a corporate job. So I went to work for Vanguard, where I was a financial planner. I led, trained, coached financial planners. I invented products and services for advice owners, for financial planners. I worked with very, very large accounts. And by the time I ended my career at Vanguard, I was advising multi-billion-dollar accounts. And there's a lot of things I really loved about this. There's so much intellectual stimulation that goes on in this career. I love the people aspect of it, the nerdy analytics, the strategy of it, the creative problem solving. And also I realized that every day I woke up and I came into work and I helped rich people get richer. And I was like, is this really how I want to use my life? Right? I was attracted to this initially because I got access to power, and I did, right? I was working with very wealthy people. And I was questioning, is this really a life well lived? And so I decided to make a career change and thought it would be really meaningful to become a trauma counselor. I was planning on a clean sweep, entirely new career, and, saying goodbye, closing that chapter of the financial chapter of my life, or so I thought. And I went back to grad school. I studied counseling. I started working with clients, focusing on survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse. And I was stunned to realize that I was still talking about money in many of these conversations. Money was coming up. And I was like, what is happening? I left the money world. The money world has followed me. And I realized that there's a gap, that therapists largely don't like talking about money. They get very itchy when the subject comes up. And financial planners, I knew from my time in that field, are largely allergic to emotions. And so where are people supposed to go to talk about all these really uncomfortable things that money brings up? And so through that, I realized, wow, Joy, well, it looks like maybe you thought you left the financial world, but it's following you. And so now I work at the intersection of that. And I help advisors and ultra high net worth individuals transform how they engage with money, shifting it from a source of stress and isolation to an opportunity for connection, impact, and lasting fulfillment. So that's what brought me here.
Wow. Well, there's only about 12 different directions we can go with that. That is so appealing and just an amazing trajectory. I had one question in being raised in the cult and seeing that there was a lot of powerlessness within that cult, especially for women, and I think probably what was presented about money. When you started working as that a staffer in a financial planning firm, and you got close to money and you saw how it worked, and I gathered that was pretty exciting for you. Was there any type of disconnect you had internally or spiritually going on with that?
So it's interesting. It evolved over time. I remember fairly, probably about 5 years into my career, a couple that I did planning with that really impacted me profoundly. And they came in for financial planning. They were about 50. They had what in today's dollars would be a few $1 million, and they were just civil servants. And they lived very modestly. And I remember as I was, getting to know them, hearing their story, doing financial planning, I learned that they lived on 1/3 of what they made. They saved 1/3 and they gave away the other third. And I asked them why they did this. And they said, well, we have enough. Like, we don't need more. And we have this so we can give to others. And they became a role model for me. I was like, oh, that's how I want to live. I want to be okay with there's enough. I don't want to be on this, because I saw a lot of other people, a lot of clients, they're constantly chasing this carrot that's just out of reach. And they're never actually happy and they're never actually satisfied. And so working with those clients, I made the decision, I want to be satisfied and I want to be okay with enough. And what is enough? And so I picked a number for me that was enough. And I made a commitment to myself that no matter how much money I made, I wouldn't spend beyond this point. I would save more, I would give. And that was a way that was spiritually meaningful for me for quite some time. And then as when you advance and when you succeed in the financial planning field, for those who don't know, you end up working with higher and higher net worth clients and bigger accounts. And that's why I studied tax law, so I could work with more complex clients. And so when I reached the point that I was working with people who have multiple commas in their net worth statement, this is where it was starting to feel empty, because I saw I'm solving some problems, but I'm also creating other problems for these people. I'm creating other problems for the world. I was actively contributing to income inequality. And that is where I felt really like spiritual disconnect and dissonance. And that was what started a long journey of how do I bring my life in alignment with these values, which is what ended up leading to the career change and what led me here.
I'm just really struck by how you've negotiated the cognitive dissonance through this and made it your own, came up with things that work for you. Mm-hmm. And I can see that blending of both areas, the human side, the connection, along with the money, and the dollars and cents. And that's beautiful. So I am curious, you went back, you're going to be a trauma specialist, money wouldn't leave you alone, kept showing up, which isn't surprising in that I had a therapist once tell me that came to one of our trainings. He said, Kaylor, I used to wait for people to stop talking about money so we could get down to the serious stuff. He says, now 60% of all my therapy starts with the money. Mm-hmm. And I think you really you took words just out of my mouth, how I view the planning side and the therapeutic side. What led you into IFS?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I have been in a fair amount of therapy myself over the years. I mean, you can imagine when you're raised in a cult, therapy's probably going to be helpful at some point in your life. And therapy can sometimes be really painful and really difficult. And when I was introduced to IFS, I felt like I'd been going to the dentist for years. And I showed up one day and someone said, hey, you want some Novocaine? And I was like, what? You mean like a dentist visit doesn't have to be as painful? You can, like, Novocaine's a thing. And that's what IFS felt to me. It felt much gentler and easier and less painful than many of the other forms of therapy I'd experienced. So that was personally what I experienced. And I was like, wow, well, this feels great. And I'd love to be the dentist that offers people Novocaine as opposed to let me just drill in your roots without pain meds. And so that's why I decided to get trained in IFS.
So what was it about IFS that represented the Novocaine? What were you experiencing in traditional therapy that was so painful that IFS helped mitigate?
So how I would characterize this as a clinician is I would say that, there are some folks in the healing profession who believe we have to heal it to feel it. And if a little feeling is good, a lot of feeling is better. And as someone who works with folks, who has worked with folks with really severe trauma histories, I recognize that we have a window of tolerance within which healing can happen. And if we go over that, healing is actually much harder and it's slower. And so I feel like as a clinician, IFS has given me many, many tools for helping people bring whatever it is we're experiencing within the window of tolerance so that they are able to experience it without being flooded, without being overwhelmed, without feeling so reactive that they can't function for the rest of the day, for example, or the rest of the week.
That also be a term be re-traumatizing? You
could say that. You could say that, but it can be really intense. And and I believe that it doesn't have to be excruciatingly painful. I do think that, like, in our culture, there are some circles in our culture that believe, pain is weakness leaving the body. And, if it's hurting, it means we're doing it right. And that's not how it has to be. There's other ways it can be as well. And IFS can be used in ways that I think make it easier to go where you need to go in a way that that your system can tolerate and is healing and restorative. And and it doesn't have to put you on the floor.
That's a fascinating way to frame up IFS. And I probably have told you at some point in time, I was raised in group therapy. I did one-on-one and just didn't do it for me. And I got into group therapy, and it was as scary as anything I'd ever gotten into. One guy used to say group therapy is like slitting yourself opening, putting all of your innards on the floor, letting people stomp all over them, and then collecting them at the end of the session.
Wow.
That's how I was introduced. And definitely, you've got to feel it to heal it was a huge mantra. And this was a psychodrama group. And I after 25 years-ish, kind of hit a wall with that therapy. I made progress. It was good, but I hit a wall. And as you know, when I ran into, by mistake, IFS and Dick Schwartz, and did my first session with him, I cried like a baby for 30 minutes and got to places that I hadn't gotten to in 25 years of group.
Yeah. So
I resonate with your description. And I remember therapists saying when I was in the group therapy, which is where we started financial therapy, having week-long workshops, and we'd have some training, then we'd go to group. And one person wondering, I wonder if we're re-traumatizing people. That's why I asked that particular term. I wonder where that line is that we've actually gone too far with an individual.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and that's where I've learned that. I mean, again, I have a history of working with people with really severe, as a therapist, I've worked with people with really severe trauma histories, and they sometimes have severe mental health diagnoses. And even IFS can be re-traumatizing, honestly, depending on, and this is why if you work with someone, you want to work with someone who's really skilled, who has experience working with the population you're part of, that they can modify as necessary to make it work for you. I do feel like, maybe I'll pause there, because I realize that might be a bit of a controversial statement in some IFS circles, but that is my experience, that sometimes IFS needs to be modified to make it appropriate for everyone.
Yeah, it probably would be controversial to some, and there's a lot of modification going on in the IFS community that maybe the core doesn't appreciate. I mean, financial therapy in IFS is a modification. Yeah. In itself.
True.
Because when I first started playing with this, it wasn't until my third week of level 1 training, I thought I had no clue IFS might be able to be used with money. I mean, I was there to learn it really kind of for myself. I'd had 4 years of one-on-one. It's like, okay, I'm ready to look under the hood. And it wasn't until that third week I thought, I wonder if you can use IFS with financial therapy. And I thought at first, no, IFS is an agendaless modality. It's a facilitation. Money is an agenda. Nah, it's not going to work. And through the guidance of some lead trainers saying, well, tell me more about that part, Rick. And working with my cohorts in level 1, I decided, holy cow, you can really get some traction with this. So I it's certainly not past this this podcast to say, yeah, I wonder if it needs modification. And you're talking about working with severely traumatized folks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I can think of somebody I worked with that I think was severely traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I hit the cadence to really get beyond the protectors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a time to say, okay, this doesn't seem to be working.
Mm-hmm.
What can work? And somebody like myself, I've certainly been exposed to trauma therapy, but I have not been trained in trauma therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that what's interesting to me is there are a lot of people who have experienced pretty significant trauma who don't see it that way. And so they don't use that term. So they may not come to you saying, hey, got a bunch of trauma here around money. Can you help me with it? It's not how it shows up.
Yeah.
They come sharing, like, it's really hard for me to make this decision. I've been trying to change this behavior for 3 years and it won't change. What's happening? Or it's often what it sounds like, or I haven't paid my taxes in 5 years and I know I should, and I'm afraid I'm going to get arrested. And like, please, can you help me figure out how I can change my behavior? These are the ways it sounds. And then as you dig down and hear, you find out, often, I feel like we find out that someone that they trusted used money in ways to harm them. Mm-hmm. And they don't necessarily think of it as trauma or call it trauma, but it's really impacted how they engage with money and how they engage with themselves around money, and that it doesn't necessarily feel safe to even be getting close to money, and like by thinking about it and talking about it. So these are and because the harm was done by someone that's close to them, that they trusted, it can be really hard for them to receive self-energy from you as the person who's showing up. And so those are some of the areas where I see that modifications are really helpful, because what do you do when offering self-energy to the person feels threatening to them? You need modifications.
Okay, now the nerdy part of me wants to go right into what are those modifications? What do you do? This is very interesting to my IFS financial therapy part, but I'm going to restrain myself. We could talk about this at another time. What I love about what you just said was they often don't call it trauma. And it took me right back to the first time that I heard trauma, and that I heard emotional abuse. Now, emotional abuse doesn't have a trauma word in it. And my reaction was, give me a break. Here is this namby-pamby, therapeutical talk, emotional abuse. Give me a break. Not that I had a lot of coping mechanisms or anything. Mm-hmm. And that was my reaction to emotional abuse. Mm. When I heard trauma and talking about being traumatized, I could only think in terms of large T trauma, what I would call big trauma.
Like war or like...
yes.
Headline trauma, yeah.
Yes. And of course, there's a part of me that said, how could you not know if you had big T trauma? And one of the gifts I had in being in group therapy for off and on for 25 years is I was privileged enough to see people working through big T trauma that happened multiple times, and they felt shame over what had been done to them.
Mm-hmm.
And just ashamed of even thinking of it as trauma. And I got it. I mean, I remember just being, how is this possible? How is this possible? So you can imagine when somebody suggested to me that I might have a lot of little t trauma in my life that I later learned adds up to be called complex trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I just rejected that. Like, no, I have not been traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
So I get what you're saying, because I was one of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll offer, for listeners who might be skeptical of this, I want to acknowledge that we live in an age of over traumification, if you will. That it is very popular in some circles online to label everything as trauma, even just normal discomfort and inconveniences, some people refer to as, oh, that was traumatic. And so I want to acknowledge that when it was just uncomfortable. So I want to acknowledge that on one hand, some circles tend to overuse trauma and call everything trauma. And in other circles, we tend to underuse it and think everything is normal, even when it's deeply, deeply harmful. So I want to acknowledge that we live in this bifurcated age, and it can be really confusing for people, honestly. So there are a number of terms that kind of like fall into these polarized places. And yeah, I just feel like naming that is helpful, so that it's okay if you're finding yourself being skeptical of this right now. For some people, it is really meaningful to have a name to, like, oh, these things that I experienced all throughout my childhood, that's considered trauma. That's not normal. That can be really helpful in healing. For other people, it can feel actually disruptive to their healing to have their inconveniences named as trauma. So I want to acknowledge that there is a lot to this. And there's a lot of nuance to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As you're talking, I fixate around a type 1 on the Enneagram, and the deepest fear of a type 1 is that they're corrupt or defective.
Mm.
So to label something trauma, this is calling me defective or corrupt. And that hits a shame button, which is just exactly what you've just described. Just a huge shame button.
Yeah.
And so just piggybacking on what you said, it is okay to have that reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, I can't have had trauma. That means really bad things. It's the same thing as for me getting into counseling. First thing I asked one counselor was, when will we be done? Is this one visit or two?
Yeah.
Because it was so shaming to be in that place.
And this is where I feel like IFS is really helpful to those of us who are practitioners, whether we're financial advisors or financial therapists, is noticing when our parts want to label something. Is that helpful? Actually going to be helpful for our client? I rarely use terms like trauma with my clients, honestly. I try to let my clients use the terms that are meaningful to them and that are resonant with them.
Follow up on those. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Joy, we are out of time for this segment. Where can people find out more about you?
JoySlabaugh.com. So that's Joy, and then Slabaugh is spelled smiles like a big, awful, ugly groundhog. SLABAUGH. JoySlabaugh.com. You can also you can follow me on LinkedIn. Joy Slabaugh on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Instagram under Wealth Alignment.
Perfect. Joy, thank you. This has been fascinating. Would you be willing to come back for another
Absolutely. Happy
session? To. Okay. Thank you so much.